Sarah sat on her bed, the weight of her mother-in-law's words pressing heavily on her chest. Why do you still own the house you were supposed to have renounced? The question echoed in her mind. She felt a mix of frustration and defiance. I withdrew the renunciation application, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. It's challenging to pull back from such a decision once declared, but there's a window of time when it's still possible. What I showed you was just an application still in progress. Her mother-in-law's skepticism was palpable over the phone. So the house really is yours now? If you inherited it before the divorce, doesn't that mean it's part of the division of property? The subtle threat in her tone was unmistakable. I pretended to renounce the house to gauge Tony and your reactions, Sarah admitted, choosing her words carefully. I hoped Tony would say he didn't want a divorce. If he did, I would have reconsidered everything and explained the truth later. Then we'd split the profits when the house is sold, right? Her mother-in-law pressed, determination lacing her words. But Sarah was prepared. If we had bought that house together, it would be considered marital property. But since it was inherited, it's my separate property. And separate property isn't included in the division of assets. Didn't you consult a lawyer about this? Her mother-in-law asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Sarah felt a flicker of frustration. If we had made mortgage payments or renovations, that might have changed things, but we didn't. The truth is, there's hardly anything Tony will get. Maybe the car, but it still has a loan. Is that all this is about? You want to keep the inheritance for yourself? Her mother-in-law's bitterness was evident. How cruel. I want to protect that house because it is the home my parents loved. I don't want people like you living there. The conversation had reached a tipping point. If you have anything else to say, let's communicate through lawyers from now on, Sarah stated firmly, asserting her boundaries. As she hung up the call, a wave of liberation washed over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of clarity and strength. Following that call, the divorce proceedings moved along smoothly, almost too quickly for Sarah's liking. It was clear that her mother-in-law was pushing Tony to finalize everything. With each step, Sarah felt the weight of her family's house becoming more secure in her hands. When the divorce was finally official, a deep breath of relief escaped her lips. She had managed to protect her father's house, the one place that held all her cherished memories. Once she moved out, her former in-laws remained in the cramped apartment they once shared, navigating their new reality without her. As her former mother-in-law searched for a new home, Sarah felt a mix of sympathy and relief. Finding suitable housing for elderly parents was challenging, especially given their limited options and increasing age. Eventually, Tony decided to rent a small house, where they began anew with his parents. The rent was undoubtedly higher than their previous apartment, and a new burden of responsibility weighed on Tony. Sarah imagined the countless challenges he must face, now that he was caring for his parents alone. She thought back to her mother-in-law's earlier hopes of moving into the spacious house left by her father. Reality had forced her to settle for something far less, and Sarah felt a twinge of satisfaction at the thought. As for Sarah, she had begun a new chapter in the house her parents had left her. It felt warm and filled with love, like a comforting embrace from her late parents. This place was her sanctuary, a refuge from the chaos of her previous life. But just when she thought she had found peace, the ground beneath her shifted again. One evening, she sat with her husband, Joe, when he dropped a bombshell that left her speechless. "I've demolished the house you grew up in," he said nonchalantly. Shock coursed through her. The family home, the place filled with years of laughter, tears, and cherished memories, had been reduced to rubble. Joe had always dreamed of tearing it down to build a duplex in its place, but Sarah had hoped he would respect the legacy of her childhood. Devastated, she cried bitterly over the loss of her childhood home. "How could you?" she shouted through her tears, her heart breaking at the thought of the memories now buried beneath the debris. Joe's response was cold, devoid of empathy. "It was hard to do it myself, but I'm satisfied with clearing the land." In that moment, Sarah felt a mix of anger and betrayal. She was not just losing a house, she was losing the essence of her family. You never understood, she whispered, grappling with the reality of what had just happened. As the days passed, Sarah struggled to find her footing again. At 27, she had always imagined a different life, one filled with joy, family, and stability. Living with Joe, who was 3 years older, should have felt like a dream. They had no children yet, and while she found her job fulfilling and her workplace atmosphere positive, the strain of her relationship was becoming unbearable. Before their marriage, Sarah had lived with her father, supporting each other after her mother's death. They had built a life together, and now she was navigating this new terrain without him. After her father's sudden passing, she had clung to the family home, believing it would offer her some solace. But Joe's eagerness to make use of the land felt like a betrayal. "It's a waste to leave it as it is," he insisted, his tone dismissive. "You should make effective use of it." Sarah felt her heart race with frustration. This was not just land to her. It was a treasure trove of memories. Every time Joe spoke about the house, Sarah felt her anger boiling beneath the surface. He treated her family home as if it belonged to him, disregarding the significance it held in her life. The conflict deepened when Joe's parents chimed in, urging him to take action. They had always shared his vision, and now it felt like an army against her alone. "Why can't you understand?" she pleaded one evening. "This house is my past. It's where my family lived and loved." But Joe merely shrugged, his indifference cutting deeper than any knife. Days turned into weeks as the tension mounted. Sarah's visits to the family home became bittersweet. She would clean the space, reminisce, and cry quietly in front of her parents' photographs, struggling to come to terms with her loss. Yet, each time she returned home to Joe, the weight of their conflicting visions pushed her further into despair. As her frustration grew, she knew a decision had to be made. She couldn't continue to live in a place that felt more like a battlefield than a home. Sarah began to think about what her father had once told her. "After I'm gone, you can use this house however you wish." Those words echoed in her mind, reminding her that she had the power to decide. One evening, after yet another argument with Joe about the house, she felt a surge of determination. "I'm not selling it," she declared, her voice strong. "I won't let you tear it down. This is my home." Joe's expression shifted from surprise to anger. "You can't be serious. You're holding on to something that doesn't even matter anymore." But Sarah was resolute. "It matters to me. It's a piece of my family, my history. I refuse to let it go." With that, a silent war began between them. Each day brought new challenges, as Joe continued to push for renovations and changes, while Sarah fought to maintain the integrity of her family home. Their once happy marriage began to feel like a series of skirmishes, with no end in sight. Despite the growing distance between them, Sarah sought solace in her work and the memories of her parents. She started to envision how she could transform the house into a space that honored her family's legacy, while allowing her to create new memories. Perhaps a garden, filled with flowers her mother loved, could bring life back to the property. Slowly, Sarah began to plan. She researched how to restore the home, preserving its history while also modernizing it. She found herself excited about the future, imagining family gatherings and laughter filling the rooms once again. The idea of a warm, welcoming home became her guiding light. But as she began to share her ideas with Joe, she felt the tension return. "You're wasting time on a house that should be developed," he argued, crossing his arms. "We could make a fortune." "It's not about the money," Sarah shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. "It's about my family, my memories. I won't let them be erased." The conflict reached a boiling point one fateful night when Joe came home with plans for a contractor. "I've already hired someone to start the renovation," he declared, an air of triumph in his voice. Sarah's heart sank. "You did what?" she gasped, the weight of betrayal crashing down on her. "You'll thank me later. This place will be beautiful," he insisted, oblivious to her pain. In that moment, Sarah realized the depth of their rift. It was more than just a house. It was a battle for identity, belonging, and love. "I can't believe you'd do this without even discussing it with me," she said, tears welling in her eyes. But Joe's expression hardened. "You're being unreasonable. This is our future we're talking about." And just like that, the foundation of their marriage began to crumble. With every decision Joe made unilaterally, Sarah felt her autonomy slip away. The house, once a symbol of her family's love, became a battleground that threatened to consume her. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah stood firm in her resolve to protect her family home. She decided to enlist the help of a lawyer to secure her rights and navigate the tangled web of property ownership. It was time to take a stand, to fight for her inheritance and her identity. The divorce proceedings were looming, and she could feel the weight of it all pressing down on her. Yet, amid the chaos, she began to find strength within herself. She remembered her father's love and wisdom, and she refused to let that be taken away. With the support of her lawyer, Sarah took the necessary steps to ensure that her family home remained intact. She worked tirelessly to document her feelings, her memories, and the significance of the house. This wasn't just about bricks and mortar. It was about her heritage, her family legacy. Through it all, Sarah discovered a newfound sense of empowerment. Each meeting with her lawyer and every document signed brought her closer to reclaiming her life. She realized that her father had entrusted her with something valuable, and she was determined to honor that gift. As the divorce process progressed, she felt a sense of liberation. No longer would she be at the mercy of her mother-in-law's manipulations or her husband's disregard for her family's history. She was reclaiming her narrative one step at a time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the day of the divorce arrived. Sarah walked into the courthouse, her heart racing but filled with determination. She had fought for her right to keep her family home, and now it was time to take back her life. As she stood before the judge, she felt the weight of her struggles begin to lift. The final decree was issued, and with it came a sense of closure. Sarah was free, not just from her marriage, but also from the shadows of her past. With the divorce finalized, Sarah returned to her family home, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She began to envision a future filled with love, laughter, and the memories of her parents. The house was not just a building. It was a sanctuary, a place where she could rebuild her life. As she walked through the rooms, she could almost hear her parents' laughter echoing in the hallways. This was where her story would continue, where new memories would be created. In the months that followed, Sarah transformed the house into a reflection of her parents' love. She planted a garden, filled with flowers that had once bloomed in her mother's backyard. Each blossom felt like a tribute, a reminder of the love that had shaped her life. She also invited friends over, filling the home with warmth and laughter once again. The dining table, once a place of conflict, became a gathering spot for joy and connection. Sarah discovered that while her past had shaped her, it would not define her future. Through it all, she learned that true strength comes from within. She had faced loss, betrayal, and heartache, but she had also found resilience, courage, and the power of love. The family home was not just a structure. It was a testament to her journey, a reminder that she could overcome anything life threw her way. As she stood in her garden, surrounded by the beauty of new life, Sarah smiled. She was finally at peace, ready to embrace whatever came next. The house that once felt like a battleground had become a sanctuary, a place where love would continue to thrive.